Good evening, buenos dias, and thank you for tuning in. On behalf of all of us at the locally based, independently owned bookstore, Books and Books in Miami, Florida, and in partnership with Miami Book Fair, it's my pleasure to welcome you to a virtual afternoon with Christine Pride and Joe Piazza to discuss We Are Not Like Them, published by our friends at Atria Books. Christine Pride is a writer, editor, and a longtime publishing veteran. She's held editorial posts at many different trade imprints. As an editor, Christine has published a range of books with a special emphasis on inspirational stories and memoirs, including numerous New York Times bestsellers. We are also joined by Joe Piazza, who is an award-winning journalist, editor, and podcast host. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, CNN, Marie Claire, Glamour, and other notable publications. She is also the author of Charlotte Walsh Likes to Win, How to Be Married, The Knockoff, Fitness Junkie, and If Nuns Rule the World. To moderate tonight's conversation, we are also joined by Elizabeth Bernstein, who writes the Bonds on Relationships column for the Wall Street Journal, where she has been at for 20 years. She has received awards from organizations including the New York chapter of the Society of Professional Journalists Deadline Club, the Education Writers Association, and the American Psychoanalytic Association. Throughout this afternoon's broadcast, you're invited to ask questions by using the Ask a Question feature at the bottom of the screen, and you can order your copy of We Are Not Like Them from Books and Books below by pressing the green button. We appreciate each and every order and the generous donations from viewers everywhere. And now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our guests to the virtual stage.
Hi, everyone. We're so happy to be here.
Hi, I wanted to welcome everybody and especially our super special guests, Christine and Joe. Thank you so much. And first of all, congratulations on this book. It's really impressive, fantastic. You are responsible for me getting no sleep this week. It's a page turner. It's wonderful. So I'm really excited to talk about this. And I wanted to welcome everybody else who's here tonight. I'm just super excited about this conversation. Wanted to start. You all are joining me from Nashville, right? I'm very sorry we're not doing this in the lovely Books and Books courtyard here in Miami, but we're going to do it. Yeah. Well, this will be great. So I want to ask first about your friendships. You've been long-term friends, right? And I wanted to ask how you met and a little bit. Can you give me some background on your friendship?
Shall I take our meet cute?
Did I do it last time?
I think so. We keep trading off back and forth. And actually, Joe and I weren't long-term friends. We are actually relatively, in the grand scheme of things, newish friends. Insofar as I met Joe when I was her editor at Simon & Schuster. And this is in 2017 we met when she published a book called Charlotte Walsh Likes to Win, a wonderful novel. And we really, like I said, this was our first time meeting, but we really had such a great connection both creatively. It was really fun to work together on this book. As an editor and an author, you often you're just working together all the time and you're talking all the time, and that can be a really bonding process. And so there was that aspect to it, but we also just got along really well and, wanted to hang out outside of work. And so we formed this friendship, and then we got a chance to work on another project together, which was a tie-in to the television show Marriage Vacation, which I bet a lot of people watching have watched since it's set in the world of publishing. And I published a book called Marriage Vacation that was a tie-in to the television show. And
it's very meta.
It's super meta.
We still even haven't figured out how to explain it if you're not a diehard younger fan.
Yeah. The headline, though, is I needed someone to be able to write this book in 4 weeks. That was our time frame from start to finish, which is nuts. And I was like, there's only one person who can do this, Joe Piazza, because she's very fast. And so we really dove in and we're working in a Google Doc together. And so our kind of editor-author relationship broke down, and we were both just like, okay, we got to get this done. We got to get this done. And that gave us our first inkling that we could collaborate on something else, that we could.
When was that? What year was that?
That was in we finished Marriage Vacation in early 2018. And then we almost immediately pivoted to start talking about this new idea, which was a novel idea that I'd had for a while. As an editor, you're always thinking what the book that you want to see in the world. and I had been thinking a lot for personal reasons, professional reasons, as a Black woman about, this rash of police shootings that we had been and continue to experience. And so the idea was to really look at a Black woman and a white woman and their relationship and how it would be upended if the police shooting was, personally involved, if they both had stakes in this. And in our story, Riley is covering the story as a news anchor. She's the Black woman. And Jen is the white woman who is married to the cop who is involved in the shooting. And so it really hits close to home on a lot of levels. And we knew we'd have a lot to explore there. So we dove in, and 3 years later, here we are.
3 years later, yeah.
So I, as someone who writes but writes alone, which we all know is a lonely thing, I'm so fascinated and also jealous of the fact that you were writing this together. And I wanted to learn more about that, like how you worked, like what's the nitty gritty of actually writing a book together? How do you do it?
Good question.
It was so much trial and error and figuring it out as we went along. And now it actually seems so easy. We're working on another book project together and we're like, oh, we know how to do this. Much in the same way that, like, once you learn how to write a news article and you do it for years and years, I'm like, I can bang out copy all day long. But at first we had to start using Google Docs, which Christine had never used before because people in publishing don't use Google Docs. Why would they? Why would they come into the 21st century? Which was our first fight. And then she came around.
But does one person write? Did you write and then Christine's, falling back into her editing mode and then you flip, or does one person write a chapter and the other one writes the other? Like, how do you get those words on a page together?
Yeah. In the very beginning, I did write because Christine had never written a book before, so the blank page is really scary.
It was very daunting. But just look at all that white screen. Yeah. I'm so used to seeing all words on the page.
And I was like, it's okay, I can get it down. And I did, and then she would go in and edit, and that was like for the first few chapters, especially in the proposal. And then she got more comfortable, and at that point, we had a really robust outline. Like, we knew exactly where this book was going the entire time. And so it was whoever really felt the inspiration for a scene. Like, as we were going forward chronologically, it's like, all right, I've got this. I'm going to the dock. When I'm out, you go in. And then the other one would go in. And then we had so many of our conversations actually in comments in the doc. So if there was nothing controversial, you just accept the comment. But if you're like, no, this sentence doesn't work, or I don't know why you cut this, then you make a comment. And then we would go back and have a conversation about all the comments in the chapter as a whole, and then move on to the next chapter. And we kind of alternated who took chapters, but it was never, you're taking the white character, I'm taking the Black character. It was always, we just went chronologically through the whole book.
Because it was really important for us for the book to feel cohesive, right? And so, I mean, it was a balance because we wanted to partner together. We did that on purpose because we wanted to bring different experiences and perspectives that only each of us could for various reasons. Right? And so that could inform the book. So we wanted to make sure that was there for, authenticity's sake, but we also wanted the book to feel cohesive and not like two completely different people wrote it. Yeah. And so it was like completely disjointed. And so we had to find a balance between both, bringing ourselves, to the book, but also creating two characters that were distinctly, their own and had their own voices.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And so you must have had some very difficult conversations in this, right? This is a book about friendship, which can be tense at times, and even the best of friends, but also then friends rocked by a racial incident, like by a police shooting of a 14-year-old boy. And so tell me about that. I'm wondering, is there any, like, did you have, like, you said your first fight was about Google Docs, but did you have some like memorable discussions?
Yeah. That was the first and easiest fight maybe to get through.
Wasn't the easiest. We did. There were. I'm still like holding this bitterness.
Yeah. So hard. I'm like, we're still working through these things.
There were some really memorable ones, and I think the most interesting one to me is, we'd written both the characters. We had gotten them on the page, but Riley, our Black character, didn't feel real to me because she felt flawless, like too perfect on the page. And Christine's original intent with creating Riley was she wanted to create a character who defied stereotypes of Black women and tropes we see about Black women, both on the page and in television. And I was here for that. But I was also like, I can't relate to Riley, and I don't know if anyone will, because she like literally has nothing wrong with her. Like she's just like the best at everything. She's so ambitious. She's so driven. She's so pretty. And I was like, we've got to, and I do this to all my characters. I'm like, we have to mess her up a little bit. Like we have to give her some flaws and
make her real.
Make her real. And I suggested, I mean, a list of like dozens of things. Not thinking about it, and I think I had blinders on because I would do this to any of my characters. I did this in Charlotte Walsh Likes to Win. I'm like, oh, all right, well, let's give this one like a secret teen pregnancy, my white wealthy protagonist. Let's give this one a drug addiction. Let's give this one an alcoholic father, like those things. And I bring them up, and Christine did not want to embrace any of those tropes. And I was like, why? But because I couldn't see as a white person that she was trying to avoid things that are always attached to a Black female character. And so for me, I'm like, but I would do this to any character. This isn't about race. And Christina's like, this is absolutely about race. And so that was one of the hard things that we had to get through.
Yeah.
How do you resolve a conversation? Like, can you tell me, did that get tense? Like, how do you resolve? Because I'm interested as someone who writes about relationships, how people have the difficult ones. So like, can you walk me through? Like, like,
and like, you will get this because this is what you write about.
We love your column.
We love your column so much.
Thank you.
Because, I mean, I am also, my side hustle is like doing podcasts about relationships, obsessed. Like that's my other favorite thing. We think we could write a book at this point about communication that would be awesome for married couples.
Yeah, this is what I want you to get at.
Yeah, we had to learn this shorthand for so many things. So when I first started writing things down, I wasn't used to someone reading it right away and editing it right away. And, as a writer, like sometimes you write something and you're like, that is the most beautiful sentence that has ever been written. And Christine would go in and erase it. And I would just be so incensed, right? But like we had never going into it set any ground rules for like how to save your darlings and mark your darlings and show what you really care about. And I liken that in the way that, in my household with my husband, I always put things at the bottom of the stairs. And I read that Caitlin Moran does this too. And I just expect someone going up the stairs to carry them up to the next floor, put them away. And no one ever does, but I've never expressed that that's what I need. And so like, we just hadn't expressed exactly what we need. So we had to be so clear with like, what do we need right now? And how can we give it to each other? And how can we talk about things? How do you want to convey that like, this is important to you and this is what is important to me? And once we laid those ground rules, it got a lot easier.
Because I think that the hard conversations happen on two levels, that we had to push through on two levels. There's what Joe was talking about, which is a lot of creativity and the logistics of writing a book together that are universal. So we had to figure out, that was a lot of logistics and communication. That was like trial by error and like, okay, we can set these ground rules. And then we had this whole other dynamic of talking about race for the first time, because, our characters in the book, Riley and Jen, they have not really confronted this issue head on in the course of their friendship because they met when they were so little. Yeah. There was really nothing propelling them to do so, right? At some point they were just too little to do so, and then they lived long distance, and so there was a lot of things that came that prevented them from really going there. And for Joe and I, we were new friends, so we hadn't done this, and then we chose to write a book together about race, and then we were really diving into these topics, and we both had different levels of fear and apprehension about that had surfaced. I think the thing that got us through those tough moments, at least for my sake, was that I had to learn to push past the fear, but also to not be so conflict avoidant. I think I always had this fear, which, carries on, like all of our relationships carry over to all of our other relationships, right? Like you're the same person as a writing partner, as a friend, as a daughter, et cetera. And so I think what I worried about was if we had this conflict, then everything would fall apart. Like there was either, it was all or nothing. We either loved each other and were so perfectly happy all the time, or we were never going to speak to each other again, right? And that there wasn't this level in between of, we can have a hard conversation, we can have a fight, we can have a tense email, we can have a creative difference, and then still come out on the other side of it. And I think that's why we're so open about sharing our personal story, because that's, we hope, inspirational, right? That you can push through the other side of all kinds of difficult topics. For us, it was creative tensions and race, but it could be lots of different things.
Like, it's just universal what you've learned. Like, I just really feel strongly you all have learned something in both sort of the business, the business of writing a book together. And then again, that, like you said, that second layer of race, and having these difficult conversations. I imagine you could also write a book on how to say you're sorry. Like, is that?
Yeah, I really.
So it's so interesting. So you also did a lot of research for this book. And can you tell me about that? And especially you reached out to a lot of mothers of children who were killed in police violence, right?
Yeah. And, I was simultaneously, as we were going back and doing edits and adding new layers onto the book, I was also working on a podcast for the Philadelphia Citizen. It's a nonprofit, community-based media organization about gun violence in Philadelphia. And so for that, I was also just interviewing mothers and shooting victims and even shooters constantly, and police officers and DAs. And I think that capturing the grief of the mothers really was one of the hardest things that we had to do. Capturing everyone's inner world was hard. And that was our goal, because I think the media has recently just done a terrible job with their flash in the pan headlines and clickbait, and not diving nearly deep enough into the human beings behind these tragic incidents. Even the police officers, and maybe especially the police officers, because I want to know more.
Yeah.
I'm like, how long were they in the force? What kind of training did they have? What kind of violence had they experienced against them in the past? I really wanted to understand these things. And then also, I was a new mother, and then I was pregnant again while we were working on this. And I want to know what it was like to lose your child to this kind of senseless violence. So those interviews were so integral to us trying to build these inner worlds of our characters.
I mean, because that was always our goal. It was to really like humanity and nuance. We just kept saying those two things, humanity and nuance. And that is something that, as good a job as media organizations can try to do, you only have 4 column inches, or 60 seconds, or 3 minutes if you're lucky for a long package or whatever, right? And so we wanted to use different mediums can tell different stories in different ways, right? So by approaching this as a novel, and with a longer word count, that we could take readers behind these headlines, beyond the headlines, like what is really happening in people's lives, how are they really dealing with these things, and all the shades of complexity that come up with that. It's never black and white. It's never, so easy as we want it to be, or believe it to be, or as Twitter would have you think it is.
Twitter.
And so we wanted to tell a tale that was really, really complicated, and that we were also really clear at the beginning that we did not want to have a moral agenda, right? It wasn't like, we're going to go into this book to tell you, a very expected story of heroes and villains and noble people. And, we didn't want to tell that story. We wanted to tell a story that more closely, we hope, mirrored real life. And that is why we had to do so many interviews, to make sure that it really mirrored real life, in particular, the experiences that we weren't as versed in. For me, I wasn't as versed in the world of policing or police lives. And so, that was, you got to research to write authentically.
Sure. And all those moments, I have to say, I really believe they showed up on the page. I can see your research. Like, for example, the mother, when she gives the interview to Riley, and after her son has been killed, and the way she tries to to bring him, up, to humanize him, and in her 60 seconds or so, to show those viewers who he is really powerful. But then also the trolling of the police officer's wife, like all of this, like I could see where your research, I could see it come up. So that's why I was interested to hear where it was. Did you have favorite characters? And then also, were there characters that you didn't like as much and you had to try to humanize them more? Like you really had to work to like them more?
Jen frustrated us a lot, I have to say.
Jen gets frustrated.
We got frustrated with Jen. Yeah. I mean, she's her own character, and we had to let her be her with her mistakes.
She's the police officer's wife.
Yes. And so sometimes we would, be shaking
like
a fist at Jen.
Yeah. For me, the hardest character to write was Kevin, the police officer, honestly. And, we kept getting a lot of feedback, like, Kevin seems like a cipher on the page. We need more of Kevin. And I'm like, but we're not in Kevin's head. And that was so hard because we were in both of our female protagonists' head. Because we weren't in Kevin's head, all we could give you were the conversations and the actions that he had with other people. And what we do know about a lot of police officers, you know, with the ones that we talk to, is they don't talk. They don't talk about the job. They can't when they get home. Like, this is just something, they button it all up when they get home to their wives because they have to compartmentalize it, because they do see a lot of horrible stuff and they have to go through a lot of horrible things. So it was very natural for him as a character to not be able to be emotional. And then at the end, we tried to let him have that moment of emotion. But he was the hardest one for me to write, I think. And my favorite character is totally unconventional, and she's the worst, and I still like freaking love her.
Who is your favorite?
I love Lou.
Lou is her favorite.
Lou is my favorite character.
I have to tell everybody, Lou is the mother of Jen, who is the police officer's wife, and she is a piece of cake.
Yeah,
piece of work, I should say. Piece of work. She's a little bit more.
She's just like such a stereotypical certain generation, certain class of a Philadelphia lady that I know very well, with her like giant Wawa soda and her Eagles hoodie, and says some of the most offensive lines in the book, all of which are things I have heard from people in my life. Like, none of this was us being like, what's an offensive thing a white person would say? Like, I've heard these things, but she doesn't think she's offensive. She doesn't think she's racist. It is like she's from a certain generation, and we wanted to get that generation on the page, because as we're now finally confronting race in 2020, how many times have we heard from white people too saying, well, they're a different generation, we can't change them. Like,
there's no point in saying anything. They are who they are.
And so Lou, and then also Kevin's mom, Cookie, they are that generation, and we want to show like there is no excuse for it. So we want people to see those people as characters.
Christine, did you have a favorite?
I mean, some people have asked us a lot, like, what's the character that's closest to you or more informed, and again, all of these characters are so fictionalized and not drawn from real people. But if there's one character that's the closest to a real person, it would be Gigi.
Oh, you love Gigi.
Yeah,
I love Gigi too.
I borrowed a lot. Yeah. I borrowed a lot from my own grandmother, who died a few months before we started this book. And so I feel like, she was obviously very much on my mind, and she had a lot of like sayings and truisms and just could hold court on a lot of different things. And so sometimes I think her voice was just in my head. And so she came out she oozed into Gigi a lot.
And then I wanted to ask you, because this is, such a racially charged topic, is there something that you each, I want to ask each of you, is there something you learned about race in writing this book? So say, Christine, is there something that you learned
absolutely
that you didn't know before?
Yeah, no, I actually think it's less in writing the book. Well, I would say the one thing that I learned writing the book, that writing about race is harder than I thought it was going to be. It's such a thing that I've talked about so much. It's a lived experience. It's, I read a lot of books. I had a lot of thoughts, but then trying to get all that experience, emotion, perspective onto the page in a way that wasn't preachy or didactic. Like, I struggled with that a little bit. I think the other surprising thing, though, is more about talking about the book now and people reading it. And now that we're getting feedback, from Black readers, from white readers, I think one thing that I'm learning that I really underestimated is the degree to which my white friends and I had always talked about race. And I think I had an unfair assumption, perhaps, about other people's, and specifically white people's, motivations for not talking about race. I mean, so many people come up to us now, which is great. Oh, sorry.
I'm like, the screen is.
I didn't even notice.
Right. Very passionate.
So many people have told us that this book is helping them talk about race because they were afraid to do so, and now they have an in. And I think that I unfairly thought that people, again, specifically white people, weren't talking about race because they just didn't care, or they didn't want to, or they didn't feel like it was relevant for them, or it was easier to turn away, right? And now I'm getting more of a sense of just, I want to, but I don't know how. Yeah, and I think that that's been surprising to me.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, Yes, I mean, so I learned so much about race. I grew up in very white spaces. My suburb, right outside Philadelphia, was very working and middle class, but like very, very white. And my all-girls Catholic high school was very white. And I went to Penn for college. And while it was diverse, like people self-segregated. There were like so much so that like the kids from the tri-state area went to like certain bars. And then like the kids from California went to certain bars, and Black kids went to certain bars, and fraternities and sororities were very, very segregated. And so I had not had a close Black friend before. I had acquaintances and people I did hang out with in high school, like literally 2 boys from the boys' high school, but like not a close friend that I'm with all the time, and we talk about really intimate things. And so I like had to get over my fear of talking about race, and also realize how much privilege I'd had in my life to not have to think about it and not have to talk about it. And to realize that I had no muscle for talking about it. I had no shorthand. And I think that carries over into our white character a lot.
No, she doesn't know. Like they're just learning sort of as they go along, right? To talk about it.
And for Jen, our white character, she has always seen Riley as the successful one. Riley is the one who got to go to college. Riley's the one who has a big job. Like Riley's beautiful and smart. And for Jen, she would never think that Riley has experienced any trauma, because Riley also had the great family. And so she can't even imagine what Riley has gone through, and then Riley is afraid to tell her when something bad does happen because of race in her family with her brother, Sean. She's terrified to tell her. She doesn't want to bring it up. And that silence in the book, it does become almost another character. You're constantly feeling it, and
you just want them to talk, right? You just want them to say like lean in, talk about this, like you guys need to do this, and that is a reflection of what we want people to do at large, right? Like the same way you're rooting for these characters to say, your friendship could be strengthened if you just communicated about this, and we see from both sides how much you need to do that. That is a conversation that we want to see play out on a larger scale, like at schools and at workplaces, right? Where somebody says, we see these characters, like we can do this too. Like we can talk about hard things, and we can be our authentic selves and share, be open and not have to feel like, I have to be one way at work or one kind of person to fit in, and those are the kind of conversations we really want to start and are starting. And so that's really gratifying.
I'm no doubt you're going to start a lot of them with this book. And I think it goes back to something you said earlier, Christine. Well, first of all, many people just don't know how to talk about it, but also you're worried. Like if you're in a friendship or relationship, you're just worried if I say something wrong, if something, if somebody steps on somebody's toes, then it's over. There's no like gray area in the middle. We can talk this out, which your characters learn. They have to learn that in this book, which is beautiful. So it gets me now back, putting my little relationship columnist advice column on. What's your advice for people then? Because we do need to have these conversations, there is no doubt, and we don't know how to do it. So what's your advice that you've learned in, writing this together and through your characters? What's the advice for people who want to have these conversations with their relationship people, with their friends and family?
With their people, you go.
Well, I was just going to say, this is why, we love talking about the book so much, because it lets us talk about the book itself and our characters, but also about our personal experience. And their two are so interwoven in terms of we want, if we have advice and we live, like we practice what we preach, right? In terms of, we had to stay the course. Like we had to have these tough conversations, risk hurt or confusion or miscommunication on both sides, and then push through it. And one piece of advice that we always, give and really has been helpful to us, and we hope other people take away, is that this is a journey and it's a process. You're not going to have one conversation about race or one hard conversation, period, right? And say, okay, like March 15th, we had an hour discussion and then we got through to the other side and we have this understanding and we live happily ever after. Check, done, right? That's completely unrealistic. And I think Joe and I's relationship is such a good example of you build. You have baby steps, you're a little bit open, you have a step back, you apologize, you repair, you go in again. There's going to be, I mean, we're having the best time in Nashville now on tour. It's quite possible that Joe says something tomorrow, I say something tomorrow, you know what I mean? And we're like annoyed with each other.
Well,
but
yeah,
we push forward.
It's true. But we also, I think, we've gotten very good at giving each other grace and space to say the wrong thing. I mean, even just the other day, we were driving and we were in a taxi going to Times Square because they were announcing that our book was the GMA Book Club pick.
Yeah, congrats. That's awesome.
Yeah, we're so happy about it. And we're doing an Instagram Live with Deborah Roberts on Sunday. We just love that Deborah Roberts. And I forget what I even said, but I grabbed Christine's hand and I was like,
I need some grace.
I'm going to say something and it might be ridiculous. And she gives it to me and now we can joke about it, right? Like, because we have gone through it. But, you know, when we did have those tough conversations, and Christine is very conflict avoidance and I'm not, I'm Italian, as you can see. I'm like, what? Let's get it out there. And so when she was avoiding the conflict, like I wasn't understanding, and that was making me more defensive and tense. And we're both just afraid. And I think that fear grows between friends, and then also between, like, this is what makes it hard to talk about it as a society. We're all afraid. And so being really—
Did you break the ice? How'd you break the ice? Did you do it in texting, like the characters?
We did have emails. I mean,
no, we started texting again, I think. As we started texting, I was like, no, I'm like, we have to do something. I think we started texting personal things first before, like, baby picture or something, like, to break the ice and to try to, like. And then
Joe had a baby, so it's a picture for her baby. It wasn't, our icebreakers were.
We're not.
Here's a picture of me as a baby.
I've never. I've never seen a picture of you as a baby.
Oh,
I would like to see a picture of you as a baby.
Sally cried. My mom was.
Let's text.
So many of them.
Sally,
we can make that happen immediately.
We do learn, like, one thing. And so then it was baby steps to get back in, but now we're in a really good place and we can talk about these things. And, you know, I'm trying to be really honest also about my, like, journey as this white woman. And I said this before, I'm like, sometimes I feel like a stumbling, like, sitcom dad or something. Like, I'm just like, but when we talk about this at book events, you can see an entire crowd of a lot of white ladies being like, yeah, no, I feel the same way.
Because I think we want people to lean into these conversations, and there's so many reasons why you wouldn't, right? For a fear on both sides, and I think a lot of cynicism, right? I think a lot of people, you know, Black people, like, it's a little bit, why should I bother? That, you know, I mean, we just all feel a little hopeless at times, I think, or it's safer just to, like, do my own thing and not have to go there. And we feel like there's something to really be gained by going there, but with the acknowledgement that it's hard. And so part of our being so mission oriented about writing this book was, it is hard. So you can use this book in your book club or at your office. We did a really big corporate event recently. You can use it, you know, with your PTA group or what have you, like friends, strangers. It's a less threatening way in to say, oh, you read this book, like this part made me feel, or, you know, I cringed when this happened, or I didn't understand why that character did that. It made me so mad, or I wouldn't have done that. I think that was completely messed up. That way that you can then talk about, you know, as every book club in the world, you start with the book and then you quickly pivot to your own personal experiences that stem from the book. And so it's a way in that you might not immediately go and talk about, you know, some family trauma, but if you read about it in the book, you might say something similar happened to me, and then there's a point of sharing and connection.
And so along these lines, you're going to be pairing readers up, right? Tell me about that.
Our find a book date program.
We love this.
Tell me how this is going to work.
Yeah. So I came up with this idea and didn't tell Christine about it.
Sure didn't. I read it on Instagram along with everybody else, and I was like, brilliant.
Yeah. Because we do share a brain at this point. So sometimes I think she just knows, and I don't tell her. So yeah, we know there's a hunger for people to have more diverse friend groups, but that's not easy either. One, making a new friend as an adult is hard. Like, I think there's like pivot. You can make new friends at work. You can, when you're a mom, I think you become new friends. But we also live in very segregated groups.
Mm-hmm.
Neighborhoods are segregated. Schools are very segregated. And so people want to talk about this book with someone not like them.
Mm-hmm.
Someone either of a different race or a different class, or even geographic diversity is very interesting. And so readers are giving us their names and their emails and like some basic information. So I now have a spreadsheet, which seems kind of creepy, of being like,
Elaine, Nebraska, black.
20, Nebraska, black.
So you're doing this yourself. Like you are pairing up with a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Like some app isn't like randomly.
No. This is just.
I mean, it might spiral out of control that we have to get Mark Zuckerberg involved some way.
No.
Never.
Are you going? But are you then going to drop in on any of these little conversations?
Hopefully.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, we wrote this book to have the conversations. We want to spark as many as possible, and so we're gonna match people up. It's like Tinder.
I know.
For diverse friendships.
Tinder for book
readers.
As much as it's amazing to talk about the book with people like we do hope that people talk about it in their families and book groups. I think there's something really interesting in talking about this book with a stranger, right? And in a way, it's almost like a safer space because this person has no preconceived judgments of you. I mean, hopefully you will see them again, but there's a possibility that you won't, and then you can be more honest. And in that honesty, talk through a lot of things. And it just feels like a really unique opportunity. Like, when have we ever seen this done before? And
it's really great. There's a political organization, there's a nonprofit that pairs, they call them Reds and Blues, Republicans and Democrats. And they do it in sort of moderated groups of 12, and you talk for a few hours. But I wrote about it, but it's fascinating because there's friendships formed out of that. People come away saying, wow, like I've learned so much. And that's what I thought of Braver Angels when I saw your post, Jo. That's how I learned about it. And so I just think it's great. So this is one-on-one. Tell people how they could
one-on-one, but also sometimes groups. So sometimes like an all-white book club will reach out to me and be like, we have like a super white book club, and then we're going to pair them with the black book club so that and hopefully maybe people will make friends and like lasting relationships.
It'd be fantastic. So how do they get on your spreadsheet?
They just DM me on the Instagram, and I'm keeping track. And literally, I'm writing them in a little notebook, and then I transfer it to a spreadsheet. It's very old school.
So give them your Instagram.
Oh, my Instagram is Jo Piazza Author.
Okay, great. I'll be DMing you later.
Right. At Jessie and my last name PRID, but she's handling all the logistics.
I'm handling the logistics because it was my crazy idea, and I will see it through.
But that's it. Our Instagrams are actually, I mean, yes, they're self, book promotion, et cetera, et cetera. But now that we're out in the world and people are telling us their experiences with the book, we also want to use our social media to tell these kinds of stories of people making connections. Or, I've told this one this week where this.
Oh, I love this one.
Yeah, this Black woman had reached out to me, and she had had a falling out. She had a white friend last summer. That friend, this is the post George Floyd summer, we were all very raw. And that friend said something to her that she took the wrong way or, felt was offensive. And as we were talking about, she was an all or nothing proposition. She just cut her off and couldn't deal with it. And then she read the book and she read this article that I wrote, and she was inspired to reach out to this woman after a year to, acknowledge that maybe there was some miscommunication on both parts, and she took it away, and she was, in a raw place. And who knows, like I said, what's going to happen with this story? We don't know. But the idea that somebody would want to take action in this way after reading the book. And so those are the kind of stories that we want to share on our social media. So please share those with us too.
Yeah.
And I think the more we share those, it puts more goodwill into the world about these topics. And that's what we do.
It's more inspirational, and I think then people feel a little bit more comfortable. Like, look, other people are reaching out. They're bridging this gap, and I can bridge it too. I can do this. I'm curious about some of the other feedback you've gotten. This must be fabulous. And can you share a little bit more?
Tell her about the text.
So my extended family grew up in Northeast Pennsylvania, like around Scranton. I sent my last book there, and very white, like working class town. And I got a text message from an early reader that was there a couple of weeks ago, right for the book came out. A woman who is married to I think he's a firefighter, but like definitely like a frontline worker. And she just wrote, she's like, I'm finished and I'm changed. And then her mother, who is a woman of a certain generation, who may or may not have said some of the things that inspired Lou and Cookie, read it too, and she wrote. She didn't notice that it was. No idea it was her. But right, actually, I'm also changed. Like, you opened my mind in a whole new way.
It's really
that's really amazing work.
Yeah, it's really, I think that's what's, we've talked a lot about pushing through the hard times, you know, in terms of the creative writing process, and it's just hard to write a book and blah, 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 blah. And we were so mission oriented about it the whole time. I mean, on days, I mean, you know, Elizabeth, like on days when you don't feel like writing, or the words don't come, or you're tired, or you're feeling tense, or whatever it is, we pushed through because we really felt like at the end of this journey, we were going to have something that, you know, really did help people, and a book that really did touch and move people. As an editor and as a writer, you just want something that's going to give people actual feelings, you know. And when you're in the vacuum and in the whirlwind, you don't know that that's going to happen. You just hope and hope and hope. And so now that the book is out there, it's just really so gratifying that whatever the reviews that say it's like good or whatever, which is always nice ego-wise as a writer, but really what we love is, you know, I cried, I was touched, I called somebody, I rethought this, I changed this, you know, like action and feelings. It's really powerful.
It really is. I think it's really going to spark a lot of conversations. I'm very excited to see it go out there. Just so wonderful. Well, we're going to get to some questions now. So if anybody wants to put any questions, I got a few here that I'm going to call up. I haven't seen them yet. But if anybody, I'd love to see some more questions. If anybody wants to have them. Let's see. We have one. Were there any books that inspired you both to write this?
You know, we went back through one of the reasons that we wrote this book for a lot of reasons, but we see so many books about like romantic love and not as many celebrating like really strong, amazing female friendship. And that's what we wanted to focus on, like, because our own female friends are like the backbones of our lives. So we went back and read a lot of books about
Let's Take the Long Way Home.
Yes.
It's a memoir about Gail Caldwell's book about her
female friendship. And I reread Beaches and I watched Beaches.
And you cried.
Oh, each time it gets you, I mean, like, you know,
every time.
And each time it gets you.
But she just goes back for her friend. She's there. She's the one that's there. You know, because I think it's just so nice to see how other writers portrayed female friendship on the page. And then, you know, we read a couple cop memoirs.
Oh, really? Tell me about those.
Yeah. What was it? It was The Black and the Blue. The Black and the Blue. From the point of view of a Black cop, and then we interviewed him as well about his experiences with racism within the police department.
And I love Lucy McBath's book. We were doing a lot about mothers who had lost their children to gun violence and racial related gun violence. In Lucy's case, it wasn't a cop, but it was a white man, and it was racially charged murder of her teenage son. And I tried to buy her book at Simon & Schuster and on proposal. And so reading the finished version as we were working on this, you know, it's just like these firsthand accounts are just so powerful when you're trying to capture, you know, emotions and somebody's experience. And the beauty of memoir is you can really delve into one person's experience. What we had to do is take a lot of different people's experience, a lot of different memoirs, right, and kind of roll them into one novel then. So,
well, and you know, for us too, it was so like this had to be fiction. We wanted to write a novel. We could have written a book. Christine, we're friends, and Christine's Black, and I'm white, and you know, Big Friendship was an amazing book that did that already. They're like, that has happened, and there's so many incredible nonfiction books about race. But we think a lot of the people that probably need to be reading them will not pick them up. They have titles that feel very accusatory sometimes. You know, White Fragility, How to Be an Anti-Racist, and you will pick up a story about two lifelong friends, a novel about two lifelong friends, because for as much as we deal with hard stuff, like it's still an enjoyable read. It's still a page-turning read, but one that hopefully makes you think. We say all the time, we're like, come for the friendship, stay for The social justice.
I love that. You need bumper stickers on that one.
That's our next t-shirt.
That's I'll make it.
We should have put that on the back.
We should have put that on the back. Yeah.
There you go. So then another question, what was the most enjoyable part of writing this book together? That's another question from the audience.
Yeah, I like doing things with somebody else. Like I'm such a partner person, I'm not a loner in any sense of the word.
You're not.
And so even though I don't have anything to compare it to, because Jo's written 1,000 books, so many books. I don't know how she's done it. And so I don't have the comparison of doing this on my own, but I also can't imagine doing it on my own. So I think the best part for me was to have somebody to talk to, somebody to vent with, to eat French fries with, order pizza late at night, while we're working.
All those things.
All those things, especially the French fries part. And even the writing part was great to have a partner. And now that we're in the promotion part and talking about the book and traveling,
so much better promoting a book with someone else.
To book clubs, it really does feel like a bonding moment to do this in a very specific relationship. We know what friendships are like, we know what marriages are like, we know what colleagues are like. This is a weird mix of all of those.
It's a weird mix of work,
married, and friends, and colleagues, and so
all together. I imagine you just having the best fun rolling through your book tour, right?
It is. Also when there've been real ups and downs in this book's publishing process, and if we hadn't had each other, I don't know if we would have gotten.
I think it's true. So the
Can
ups
you tell us about those? Can you tell us what they were, or give us, an idea of when you say ups and downs, what you mean?
We just had so many. I think we leave it on a positive note in that we've been talking about how great it's been.
Well, then tell me about your next project. Enough about that. Tell me about your next project.
So we are about, what do you think? 100 pages into our second book, which we can't say much about the plot itself, but even when we were thinking about We Are Not Like Them and talking about that idea as writers, an editor, you want to think long term, right? What else are you going to write? And we knew we probably wouldn't do a sequel, but what we really wanted to do was stay with this brand or this angle of looking at race in intimate spaces and relationships, right? And so how race affects, not big picture, not facts, bigger statistics, but just We Are Not Like Them. What happens between two people of two different races when they have to confront something. And so we had a friendship in the first book. It's just a different relationship in the second book.
Another novel.
Another novel. Yeah. We
different characters, not following any of these.
Yeah. We want to look at race from a really in a microcosm and within intimate relationships, as opposed to race in the world.
And that can be such an abstraction, right? Until you can see this is what made that character do that, or this is what it felt like when that character experienced that. And you can't, if you don't have a friend of another race or know somebody to get those accounts firsthand, it's really hard to understand. And so we want to keep writing books that explore that terrain, because that's where we really do believe empathy is built.
I feel like you're also going to get a bunch new in the feedback to this book. You'll be gathering so many more stories that will inform the next book, right? So where are you going next?
Yes, we leave tomorrow morning, go home, get a couple days break for the weekend, and then we have a slate of events next week that are all 90% virtual.
We have one in person. We have another New York in person. We have a Philadelphia in person. We are virtual in Milwaukee and virtual in Los Angeles.
And we're hoping that these events continue to. We love getting, even on Zoom. We were a little disappointed that our tour didn't have more in-person events because Delta and whatever, but it's actually been great to be on Zoom and to get to talk to so many interesting people. And so we hope that these kind of conversations continue, right? That we can, you have kind of a traditional book tour where there's bookstores and, you build that out for the first 2 weeks, but we're hoping the next phase of that is, our buddy reads is more casual, is, Joe and I are happy to, this is what we live for, this kind of engagement. And so we're just happy to be on the road, even if the road is from my living room to the computer in my kitchen. That's the rule.
With French fries. So is there anything that I haven't asked? We're sort of coming up on the end. We didn't get a ton of questions. And if anybody else has any more questions, I'd love to see them right now. But anything that you want readers to really take away? I think we've covered a lot, but is there something I didn't ask that you want readers to take away?
What's been our favorite question so far? We spend a lot of time casting our characters.
Oh, we do.
For the big screen.
Yeah, we're about to start having those talks. So
yeah. Oh, I have no doubt we'll see them on the big screen. So do you have ideas? Do you have like dream people you want to play them?
Oh, we do.
Fox, they change every day.
Who's today's?
All right. So for a long time, I was very into Janelle Monáe for Riley.
I love her.
I had another one. I had a dream last night.
Oh my gosh, this is breaking news. No, I don't even know.
You accepted in your dream?
I'm not going to tell you until you show me a baby picture of you. It's a Ray.
Oh, yeah. She'd be good.
Yeah, she would be good. She would be good.
Insecure is one of my favorite shows.
Insecure is so good. Yeah, and I mean
and talk about a celebration of female friendship.
Exactly.
I mean, that show really centers friendship in such an incredible way.
You know, and then for Jen, I've been thinking about Kristen Bell. I also love Diane, who I follow on Twitter or on the Instagram.
I still like Meryl Streep's daughter, Marty.
Mamie Gummer. Yeah, seems really great. So our biggest thing is we want to work with people who are as passionate about this subject as we are, about tackling race in a really real, raw, and authentic way, and female friendship. And frankly, someone who's passionate about getting it made. I don't feel a lot of my projects have kind of languished in development limbo, and we want to make sure that someone wants to do this when we think the moment is right.
Especially, no, I was just going to say the timing does feel right to us, and it's been a little woo-woo with this book in terms of twists and turns in the pandemic and timing, and now it's here, and it feels like the right moment for this book to be here. Like sometimes a book just comes out at the right time, and I think that that's the case for all different kinds of content too, including a movie, right? Like there is some sense of urgency on our part, the same sense of urgency that we felt with the book. Like, we want to get no time like the present, like people are hungry for this. It does feel like we want to keep this conversation going in the screen. This is not, 10 years down the road. And this is not like some precious indie, like I have to work on my project for 10 years.
No.
We want
get it out there.
Yeah. I was so struck that you wrote this book and rewrote it and edited it over 2020. Like, I don't know exactly what piece of that process, but this was a book that was in production that you were working on during one of the most turbulent years, of our memory. And that now it's out, though, almost when we need it. I almost think it's perfect timing because people can hear it now. We're not all screaming at each other still. We can calm down and hear it. And then a movie, which I can't wait to see.
Me too.
Will come out too. Fabiana's back.
I'm back.
Welcome back.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this conversation. I've just been sitting here with a smile on my face with the camera off the whole time.
I'm gonna take a picture of us and put it on the ground.
Yeah.
It didn't happen.
You're not in it.
You're in it. I'm so bad at this.
Well, thank you again so much for this conversation. It's just been wonderful to listen to. And thank you, Elizabeth, for moderating tonight's conversation. And I just want to remind everyone who's watching that you can buy We Are Not Like Them from Books and Books if you hit this green button or just visit our website. And don't forget to support indie bookstores during this time. It's so important, and we just need to keep it going.
And we love Books and Books. I spend 3 months out of the year in Miami every year. So
Amazing.
The Lincoln Road one closing made me so sad. But I bought many books at that store. So.
Well, thank you. And thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. And have a great night, everyone.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for doing this. We love talking to you.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Bye. Good night.